Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on What's New in Apprenticeships, to be delivered by Alison Sumpter. My name's Nadia Morad and I'm a project leader for the Southern Universities Network. Just before I hand over to Alison in a moment and we get started on the topic, I'd just like to check that everyone's actually able to hear me okay. So if you are able to hear fine at this point, would you be able to just type yes into the questions or comments box that you should have in front of you? Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I can see a couple more coming through now, so thank you. That's great to hear and to see that everyone's able to hear and that the tech's working fine. To give just a little bit of background to the webinar programme and to the Southern Universities Network, or the SUN. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the SUN, we are a partnership of 6 universities and we form part of the National Collaborative Outreach Programme, again, which some of you may well be familiar with. The central aim of the work is to increase participation and progression to level 4 education. So the bulk of our work is, of course, with young people in schools and colleges, but the webinar programme forms part of our teacher and advisor and higher education staff CPD. The timing for today, we are going to be approximately an hour, so we should be finished by the very latest of 5. So don't worry, you will, of course, be able to get away at that point. Just to make you aware as well that the session, as all of our webinars are, the session is being recorded. So that should enable you to share it if you'd like to share it with colleagues who aren't able to tune in today, or of course to refer back to it later. And in terms of the format, in just a moment, I'm going to hand over to Alison, who will be delivering the webinar with one of her colleagues as well. As Alison's presenting, if you do have any questions or particular kind of comments or concerns or anything that comes up for you while you're listening, you're very welcome to type those questions into the comments box as we go. And then I will, at the end of Alison's presentation, I will then address those questions over to Alison to feed back to you on. So you're very welcome to do that as Alison's presenting. But we will also have some time for questions at the end of Alison's presentation. So you're very welcome to kind of save the questions and ask them at the end. If you can, please, if you're able to stay right to the end of the webinar, that would be really appreciated if that's possible, just because we've got 3 very short multiple choice questions to form part of our evaluation at the end. So if you are able to just stay right the way up to the end, that would be really appreciated from our side. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alison to start leading on her presentation. You should, in just a moment's time, you should be able to see Alison's PowerPoint, and you should also, of course, be able to hear Alison presenting. But if you could just bear with us while we switch presenter, because sometimes the line can go just a little shaky, because Alison and myself aren't in the same room at the moment. Okay, so thanks very much again for tuning in today. And again, just bear with us for just this moment.
Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint screen? Nadia, I'm going to need you to give me some clues because the chat box isn't coming up in my screen, so only you are seeing that.
Yeah, Alison, that's yeah, the PowerPoint's showing fine. You might want to just make it full screen if you can, just to make it a little larger. But yeah, we're getting lots of comments saying that people can see it.
It's full screen in my screen, so
okay. If there's kind of a max box or a zoom function, you could do that, but equally we can see it fine. So yeah, you're fine to go ahead. Thanks, Alison.
Okay, so sorry if that isn't full screen for you. Okay, so my name is Alison Sumpter. I'm the network manager for the Association of Learning Providers for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. What that means is I support all of the local organisations who deliver our apprenticeships locally to collaborate and to say work on marketing projects or work with our other stakeholders. So I'm kind of the glue that holds our provider networks together. And I'm going to be supported this afternoon by Jodie Fair, who's the manager of a very new initiative here in the Solent that we'd like to introduce to you, called the Solent Apprenticeship Hub. You may well in your areas have an equivalent, so we'll be introducing this model, and perhaps some homework will be to think about who you might contact in your locality that might have a similar offering, because it's a really important new part of the apprenticeship family. So this afternoon we will be covering the apprenticeships, the basics, so just making sure we're all on the same page, as it were. Also going into a really important piece of work that we do at the moment when we talk to people in schools about the opportunities for full or part-time degrees through the apprenticeship route now. I've mentioned that we'll be showcasing the Apprenticeship Hub, and in so doing we'll be looking at some of the local opportunities that are being offered and the differences around the opportunities that we're starting to see emerge because of the reforms in our apprenticeship landscape. And then finally and importantly, I would like to signpost you towards the plethora of resources that are out there. There is so much there and it can be quite confusing. So I'm going to point out some really good examples of resources that perhaps you can access and use. So to get us started, I thought I'd get you answering some questions in the chat box. So Nadia, you might be required for this to shout out some answers for people. Just 3 simple questions. I'm sure you know the answers, but just to get the grey matter working, I wonder if you can write into the chat box the answers to these questions. So number 1, what is the eligibility age range for apprentices? What have you got for me, Nadia?
So I'm giving just a moment, Alison, for some of them to come up, but we're getting, yep, here we go, a couple of answers through. So we've got one response saying no age limit, question mark, 16 plus, 18 plus, 16 to 20, a couple more the same, so kind of 16 plus, 18 and above. Yep, that's it. So far, that's all of our responses.
Thank you. A nice range of responses. So I'm delighted to tell you that it's a few of you have definitely got it right. The answer is 16 plus. So in the past, apprenticeships have very much been known as part of the measures of post-16 opportunity. So very much 16 to 24 was always talked about, with 16 to 18 within that being the priority. Under the apprenticeship reforms, it's very much more an all-age programme, and that's one of the major differences over the last few years. So 16 plus is the right answer. People have to be a school leaver, so they have to have hit that age. But other than that, there is absolutely no age limit. So an important one to remember. So another simple one, I know you'll know the answer to this one. What is the level 3 apprenticeship equivalent to?
Lots of responses coming through, Alison. Plenty of them are saying A levels, degree level, BTEC.
Perfect. Okay. We're going to have to track down those people that said A levels and find the biscuit tin. So yeah, the level 3 is actually equivalent to A levels. But again, through the reforms, what we're finding is that we've now got fantastic opportunities right the way from level 2 all the way up to level 7. And it's the first time we've ever had that full progression opportunity. So I'll be coming back to that as we go through the presentation. And then this one's quite a tricky one, so I wouldn't necessarily expect you to know this, but just in case you do, what is the most popular degree apprenticeship to date being offered?
So Alison, we're getting some responses through, quite a few saying engineering, chartered manager, mechanics, nursing, hairdressing and beauty. There's quite a variety in this, actually, lots and lots of different responses. Chartered surveying or accountancy. Again, fantastic. A couple more coming through of engineering. There we go.
What that's shown me is our lovely audience knows so much about the various choices out there. The ones that said chartered business manager are correct. And this, as we stand at this point in time, it's one of the ones that came out first at this level, but it's being caught up on. And Jodie might have something to add in terms of talking about that later, because certainly our higher end level of apprenticeships is very, very popular, but at the moment this is the one that's winning in terms of enrolments. So well done for participating, just to get the grey matter working. I'm just going to go back for a moment and just make sure everybody is absolutely clear on the basics of apprenticeships. And this won't take long at all, but just to get us on the same page. So we know that apprenticeships are first and foremost a job. It happens to be a job that has structured learning, and only those two things coming together can make an apprenticeship. So because it is a real job, it has to be with bona fide employer, and therefore the person will be paid a salary, they will be able to have a contract of employment, holiday pay, sick pay, in line with any other employee. But alongside that, they are gaining a nationally accredited qualification, certification, and of course getting that all-important work experience. On top of their ability to be in work, they have that support from a training provider. I mentioned my network. We happen to have about 40 that belong to the ALPHI network. That's just Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Nationally, there are literally hundreds of providers, and the provider role is to support the learner through the apprenticeship journey. So whether it be pastoral support and of course training support, navigating the whole apprenticeship piece, they are a really important part of the sort of triangular approach that forms an apprenticeship. I've mentioned duration there, 1 to 4 years. Of course, that will be absolutely dependent on both the level the person's coming in at, their prior experience, but also the sector and so forth. So it's very much a rule of thumb. And I'll talk to you in a little while about more specifics about certain sectors and where we will know the actual amount of time that some of them will take. So another important part of being an apprentice is that it is essential the person is doing structured learning for around about 20% of their time. So that is something that in the early days of the reform 2 years ago put some employers off, saying, what do you mean, 20% of the time off the job? That means I have to give my person up for a day of week. There are a number of answers to that. The first is good, yes, I'm glad they've understood. 20% is a minimum of what the person should be doing in terms of structured learning. But that structured learning doesn't necessarily mean it has to be away from the workplace. It could easily be a number of things that happen in the workplace. Some apprentices never need to attend college, or at least very, very infrequently, or a training provider. So that off-the-job training could be workshops that are delivered in the workplace. It could be training and development sat alongside somebody. It could be carrying out assignments, carrying out business or commercial projects for the organisation that contribute to the qualification. It could be shadowing, it could be coaching, and all of those things contribute. So where people think that it's really difficult to attain, actually that's quite a myth. It's really easy to attain that level of learning, because the premise of an apprentice is that they do need training in order to be perfect at that job. And if any employer wasn't investing in apprenticeships for that reason, then actually apprenticeships probably isn't for them. So it's critical it happens. Yes, it sounds a lot, but actually in reality, it's very easy to achieve in most sectors. So in terms of the levels, we've started to mention them, and there they are. There's our family of apprenticeships. And the most important thing about all of them is the apprenticeship standard itself will outline the skills, the knowledge and the behaviours that are required in order for, at each of those levels, the person to be signed off, if you like, as fully competent at that level in that sector, in that role. So those skills, knowledge and behaviours will be clearly outlined, and I'll show you in a moment some examples of where you can find those write-ups of skills, knowledge and behaviours. And they will be level specific, sector specific. So let's go on to talk about where they come from. This looks a little bit busy, but this is probably the most important slide I'm going to show you. In terms of the apprenticeship reforms, in the past, you'll be aware that we had apprenticeship frameworks, and the framework had MVQs embedded in it. It had perhaps English and maths, and it had a couple of other things that together made up the qualification. Under the apprenticeship reforms, apprenticeships were moved away from what was then the framework written by educationalists in terms of MVQs and so forth, and they were put strongly in the hands of employers. And this is the process of how standards are developed. So basically, an employer-led trailblazer group, i.e. a group of like-minded employers, get together to say, okay, we have a particular job role where we would like an apprenticeship to be offered. So they would, in this darkened room together, be talking about the skills, the knowledge and the behaviours that make up the perfect employee under this particular job role in focus. And it's their job as a trailblazer to write this short, concise standard, 2 to 3 sides of A4, no more, plain English, so anybody can pick up and understand what good looks like in terms of those knowledge, those skills and the behaviours for that particular job role. So that's the start point of any apprenticeship. That's the start point of the standard. And then what comes behind that is how that will be assessed. And the assessment has changed. So in frameworks, you'll remember that an apprentice could be assessed in terms of a particular element of their progress on one day or 1 week, and then next week they can be assessed on something else, and over a period of time all of those separate assessments made a portfolio that was complete, and that was what was signed off. Now under the reforms, what we have is, yes, the apprentice is gathering their skills, their knowledge and their behaviours throughout the whole journey, but they have to be tested on one day in terms of the holistic learning that has been carried out in the duration of their apprenticeship. So this synoptic endpoint assessment, potentially with some grading, will be in place for all apprenticeships. And that will be carried out by someone who has not had anything to do with the delivery of their learning along the journey. So they will be signed off as competent, they will be accredited, they will be approved, if you like, and that is their qualification. That journey has to happen over a minimum of 12 months. For some, it will be much longer, as you can imagine when you were talking about the degrees, that would be the case. And this is all about the quality. It has to be that the person needs that level and that exposure to learning to be an apprentice. If they already had all of the skills, they wouldn't need it. They're not requiring an apprenticeship, and apprenticeship isn't the right route for them. The final point on this slide is that not only are employers asked to write the apprenticeship and the standards and explain the knowledge, the skills and behaviours, but they also have a transparent control over the funding that's available from the government for these. So they know how they are valued, what value is placed on them, and therefore what the investment is in the learning that is required to underpin that apprenticeship. And that is quite new in the last few years. And what that means is employers are making intelligent, quality-driven decisions about the apprenticeships they want to invest in their business. So there's some quite significant changes there. And just to sort of clarify this piece around endpoint assessment, the analogy we use is the driving, learning to drive. So we can be with an instructor all the time we're learning to drive, but we have to go to a test centre to be tested at the end. Apprenticeships have that same analogy now. We have to have that independence, and all of these measures are around quality, as I mentioned. So one of the other major changes, and I think this is important for people that perhaps want to change career, is that since May 2017, individuals can actually take apprenticeships at the same or even a lower level than other skills that they have. And I'm going to give you an example here. This comes to pass whereby someone might want a career change, or it might be that someone has done A-levels or a degree in a particular subject, and they found they now want to follow a whole new route. They are now able to use apprenticeship funding at different levels. So if they want to go from being a geographer to an engineer, they could drop right the way back to level 2 or 3 and start training again. So under the new apprenticeship regime, that is actually possible. And that opens up a whole group of opportunities for employers to really think about the way they want to develop and train, recruit, or support the progression of different members of staff within their own establishment as it stands. So when it comes to the range of apprenticeships, there are many, and I can't fit them all on one page. So I've just popped up a few wee bits and pieces for you there. But what I would advise anybody to do is follow the link at the bottom there to the Institute for Apprenticeships, because that is where you find the rich content about the detail of every single apprenticeship standard that is available at the moment. So just to give you an idea of why I can't fit them all on one slide, there are 672 apprenticeship standards listed as at today. Of those, 413 are approved and ready for delivery. The difference is some of those are still in development, but the papers start to be given to the public before they're finally approved. So that's why those two figures are different. On that site, which looks like this, you will find, for example, that all-important abattoir worker. If we clicked on that, we would find out exactly what that job role requires, what the knowledge, the skills and the behaviours are, and all sorts of information around career options, progression opportunities, the level of the qualification and the funding available, all listed on that particular one. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that yourselves, I would recommend having a little play with that, doing some keyword searches for things you're interested in and seeing what comes up. Some really exciting things there, and that's really important when we're advising people of the opportunities, because it's so interesting. There's some of the career opportunities that can be supported by an apprenticeship these days. So I want to move on to one of the big questions that we're being asked all the time when it comes to working with teachers and advisors of young people thinking about apprenticeships at the higher level. Is it about full-time or apprenticeships at degree level? My belief is we are as closer than we've ever been to parity of esteem over the two different routes for getting a degree. However, it has to be about what's appropriate for individuals, because they are very different, as you know. We have many people advising, but we also have many people who may have an agenda around this. Parents, for example, are very keen on one route or another, quite generally. So it's about having as much information as possible so we can help people make educated decisions. So if people are thinking about the facts between part-time or full-time degree apprenticeships, it's probably worth knowing that more and more universities are offering the choice. So over 80 universities have apprenticeships alongside their full-time provision. And actually, we're talking about a very similar outcome. Some of the pros and cons you will know all too clearly. For example, if we're going for a part-time apprenticeship degree, the employer will select a university they want to work with, and that means that geographically that's a very specific offer in their locality. Also, if we're going for a part-time degree, the duration will for sure be longer because you've only got part-time hours to cover the similar content. But of course, on the other side, you've got the lack of student debt, because the employer will and the government will be paying the fees for the programme compared to the student through student loan and so forth. So it is a little bit about making the right choices and thinking about the similarities and the difference. So as advisors, it's really important that we're able to enter into those conversations. There's loads and loads of resources that help with this, and I'll be pointing those out to you a little bit later on. So just want to go on to how to best access some of the opportunities that are out there. Find an apprenticeship is the first access point, not least of all because this is a government supported opportunity. They will always ask providers to list all of their vacancies in one place, and this is your first go-to. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but at Find an Apprenticeship, it is an area where people can be asked to research the jobs and the opportunities that are there. They can do it through a geographic search, through a keyword search, and so forth. They can also build their application form and then massage it to fit different opportunities without having to recreate it each time. The other important point around this site is that the ability to set up alerts, and then it can work for you in the background, pushing things that come up within your search criteria back towards you. So if young people are at a time where perhaps they're heavily involved in their exams, haven't got a time to think about job search, it can be doing some of that work for you. It also gives really good ideas about which employers do employ apprentices. So even if they aren't listed right at that moment, just thinking through who is on the site, who may have listed in the past, and so forth. People can also get ideas about being proactive, which employers to contact and who to think about. But because apprentices are a job first and foremost, let's not forget the other ways that people generally find employment. And some of these sites here are really, really helpful. Again, I'm going to come back to Amazing Apprenticeships later, not only for resources, but also it is an access point for applications and for knowing what apprenticeships are on the vacancy snapshot at any one time. But all of these sites, you've got hot links there, and I know you'll be able to get the slides, so you can have a look at and just see how they list and how they support when we're advising young people of what opportunities are there. So one thing I just wanted to do for you today is just give you a snapshot. If you go to find an apprenticeship, I just put in my local postcode in Portsmouth, and as at today, these are the numbers of apprenticeship vacancies, opportunities that are available within those different geographic areas, the 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, 20 and 30 miles. So you can see today, they're the sorts of numbers. Now, of course, I didn't make that specific in terms of particular sectors, and honing that down will be important. But that is a general overview of the sorts of numbers that we're looking at any one time. Now, I will tell you that if you don't know geographically, Portsmouth has its back to the sea, so geographically we can only move in one direction, otherwise we're swimming. So in other areas, I was working in Winchester last week, I did a similar one. You could expect to double those numbers, just to give you a little bit of background. So that sort of covers off the basics and the bits and pieces around the sort of general description of apprenticeships. I want to bring Jodie in now because she is working on a fantastic initiative here in Hampshire, and she will explain it to you. And then, as I said, perhaps if you're not in our area, you might think about who in your area might provide an equivalent service. It will take me a second just to transfer over to Jodie, so I'm sorry if it goes quiet for a moment. We will be back to you within just 10 seconds.
Hiya, my name's Jodie Fair, and as Alison said, I am the manager of the Solent Apprenticeship Hub. Just to give you a little bit of an outline of the project, what we do, what you can find in your area as well. So we started our project essentially we went live in October. I actually started work in January. So we've been going for about 3 months. We are an ESF funded project until the summer of 2021. And primarily we are an employer focused project. So we're here to provide impartial, independent, free advice for employers and to essentially handhold them through the whole apprenticeship process. I think, given what we've been going through today, you can see it's not the clearest landscape. There's been a lot of changes over the last 2 years, and sometimes that can really affect employers and they don't quite know what to do, how to navigate the whole ecosystem that is apprenticeship. So we're here to provide that advice. We are targeted to engage 1,620 people in apprenticeship. So although we primarily are an employer focused project, our outputs are entirely participant led. So they're entirely about getting people into apprenticeships. So what we're here to do, what are we aiming to improve? So obviously employer engagement is huge for us. We're also looking at diversity around apprenticeships. You know, there are some groups that are not well represented in apprenticeships, whether that be those over 50, because of, you know, that's only been a thing for the last couple of years, whether it's those from ethnic minority backgrounds, those with disabilities, you know, all of the things that you would expect. One of the aims of the project is to increase the diversity in and around apprenticeships. We're also looking around performance, and, you know, as Alison said, there's a lot of standards out there. However, there is still some really key gaps, and it's about supporting employers to become trailblazers. So if there isn't something available for their sector or their area, that they can get together with a group of like-minded employers and start to create that standard, so that more and more, although, you know, yeah, there is 400 plus standards at the moment, we will see that grow and develop and move forward. We're also about being that trusted advisor. You know, in any local landscape, there are always a lot of projects out there, and whether that be health and wellbeing, whether that be growth funding, whether that be different projects through the LEP, we are trying to provide a system where it's a bit of a one-touch for employers, so that we go in, we do a bit of an O&A, and we find out their needs of their business, their issues, their problems, and essentially develop that offer and bring in then the key people. If they want to talk about apprenticeships, fab, great, we will absolutely do that. However, the last thing we want to do is force apprenticeships down their throat. So we will not, we've, you know, got an ethic within the team of a no sales approach. Yes, please talk to us about apprenticeships, but no, we're not going to put them down your throat. We know that's not the be all and end all, and do you know what? It is about quality, and it is about providing credible opportunities. So if someone's not ready, you know, we won't give up. We'll go back in 6 months, but it's not the be all and end all. As you can see there, yeah, free, impartial, independent advice, brokerage. So, you know, one of the key things we're keen to emphasize is we are not a delivery, we're not a training provider, we're not a college, so we can't physically deliver those apprenticeships. So it is about brokerage, it is about developing those partnerships and making sure that the providers are offering, you know, a real key end-to-end service around that's quality and meets the employer's needs. We also do some other bits. You know, parents are sometimes difficult to engage with, especially in certain sectors, especially within certain demographics. So it's about getting the message out there to the parents about what an apprenticeship is, to dispel some of those myths and those misconceptions, and try and make sure that they've got all the information, so when their young person is getting to 16, 18, 21, that they know that apprenticeships are out there. It's also about looking at the parents themselves and whether they're re-entering the workforce or they're looking to reskill or upskill. Do they know that an apprenticeship is an offer? We're also dealing one-to-one with individuals who want to be apprenticeships, whether they are employed, whether they're looking to enter into a new sector, or whether they're entirely new to the workforce. That's something else that we're looking to do. Just to give you a bit of favour, as I said, we launched actually an apprenticeship week, which was 2 weeks ago, and since then we've made over 25 referrals, and I'd say probably a good third of those were to degree apprenticeships. So I think the appetite for a degree apprenticeships is certainly growing. The feedback that I've got is that that's going to be one of the most popular growth areas. We've looked at everything from, as Alison said, the chartered manager degree, but we've also looked at the strategic leadership at level 7, project management, nursing, pretty much everything in between. So, you know, there's been a lot of interest there. We've got all size employers, so we're working with everyone from large public bodies, so the local councils, things like that, down to individuals who are, you know, 2-3 members of staff and looking to take on their first apprenticeship, and pretty much everything in between. Levy transfer is also going to be a big thing for us. We're working with a lot of levy employers to make their transfer through to SMEs, where they can transfer 25% of their levy into pretty much any smaller employer or even another levy employer. So we're doing a lot of work around that. What I would say to you is we are obviously based in the Solent area, so along the south coast. However, I am aware that there are apprenticeship hubs in Liverpool, in Manchester, in the West Midlands. Certainly I know they're exploring something similar in Kent. So, you know, I would say speak to your local LEP, see if there is anything of a similar nature to us, and I know that your hub would be more than happy to speak to you. We've got a question slide at the end, so if you've got any questions, more than happy to take them then. I'm just going to go quiet again while we hand back over to Alison.
Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you can hear me. I just want to go on. Thank you so much for that, Jodie. That's really, really useful. We are so proud to have the Solent Apprenticeship Hub in our area. It's a project that we all want to link to because of that impartiality, because of that advice and guidance, and because it is open to everybody to really help and to almost lubricate the interest in apprenticeships. It's almost come at the right time in many ways, but also we are seeing so much interest in apprenticeships, and I'm sure you're finding the same, lots of questions from different people. And for that reason, I wanted to finish today by just talking about resources and support. When we look at resources, we always keep in the back of our minds the Gatsby benchmarks when we're talking in schools, particularly because we want to know that the resources that we're offering are really supporting, number one, the Stable Careers Programme, but also many aspects of each of the Gatsby benchmarks. And I know that would be important to our schools colleagues. I just want to go through some of the things that we've got locally, and pretty much most of these will be totally and easily accessible to you. Hopefully you know of many of them, but if you don't, hopefully there's some little gems in there that you can access. So in this area and in every area, there is the Apprenticeship Support and Knowledge for Schools programme. This is a programme whereby we have independent people. For us here in Hampshire, it's ourselves. We're able to go into schools, work with teachers, work with young people, work with governors to give apprenticeship presentations. We can take in young apprentice ambassadors with us. We can also run workshops on how to apply for apprenticeships, how to register on FAA, and we can engage people with the various apprenticeship champion networks. And we've mapped those sorts of activities to the Gatsby benchmarks. So at the moment, we can do this from year 10 upwards, but next year we will also be offering support through ASK and the national programme. So every area that's covered by this webinar will have an ASK offer. It's being extended to the younger age group in schools. And I think that's really important because sometimes we're finding that people are a little bit inhibited by the choices they can make because they made options choices earlier that they almost regret. So we can get in and talk to people a lot earlier under the ASK programme. Really important for us working with our young people. So every area also has the equivalent of ALPHI. So as I mentioned, I'm the network manager here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. You'll have your own network. And what we do is bring together those providers of apprenticeships. And for example, here I'm showing you a page of one of our resources, which is we can do a really quick search of people's closest town, what occupations they want, which level of apprenticeship they want, and then they can search and get a whole list of contacts providers who they can go straight to find out exactly what's on offer in their locality. So I'm sure your own networks will have similar on those websites. I'm hoping you've all heard of Amazing Apprenticeships. I think it's a fantastic site. It is for, again, everybody really that's interested in the apprenticeship piece, but it is aimed primarily at the school market. It houses things, as it says there, all sorts of podcasts, videos, activities, posters, templates, but most importantly, it's updated on a daily basis. So by signing up to the newsletters and so forth, you'll find out the most up-to-date information. That will include vacancy snapshots, it could include new posters and information, it definitely includes podcasts and so forth, which just bring together and bring to life some of the information that can otherwise be a little bit drier. One of the things I would point out to you, I've just been looking myself, there's a lovely piece on there, which is the National Apprenticeship Week 2019 teacher talk. A maths teacher called Nathan Barry gave just a 5-minute piece on there all about being a maths teacher and wondering how he can give the best possible advice about apprenticeships, and it's just lovely. So if you've got 5 minutes, I would definitely recommend that to you. I keep mentioning vacancy snapshots. You can grab all of these bits and pieces from the gov.uk apprenticeship site, but also through Amazing Apprenticeships. Vacancy snapshot is updated every month, and it will outline all of the higher and degree apprenticeship opportunities available. And because that is the new kid on the block, it's sometimes harder to find that information. So that's a way of bringing it into one place for you. So locally, last year, our network worked with Sun, who are obviously providing this webinar today, and we developed a huge array of different apprenticeship resources, again, that are downloadable, are printable, and they include things like the posters and fact sheets that you see there, or how to apply, the different levels, researching opportunity, a glossary of terms. So all of those bits and pieces. But it also wanted to get those teachers involved that don't necessarily see a direct link to apprenticeships. So we developed some simple fact sheets for geography teachers or language teachers or history teachers. We also did English and maths and science. So those sorts of resources try to get the information into all of the advisors or potential advisors for people that might be thinking about apprenticeships. We also developed some fact sheets around governors and parents, again, really important and influential groups. And here in Hampshire, we work with our governor services, and we have been absolutely blown away by the interest in apprenticeships from governors. So that's been something we've been working on really strongly over the last few weeks. And finally, under the Sun resources, we wanted to get a bit creative. So we did some word searches, we did some competitions, and we created some suggested timetable for different academic years of how apprenticeships the resources we've created might be used to introduce apprenticeships for different people at different times within the year. So what we've tried to do all the time as advisors within apprenticeships is make it easy, make it pop up and play, to have resources at your fingertips. But I know what that does is kind of also creates a little bit of mystery around just what is out there and am I getting the best stuff. So it does take a little bit of reading. So I suggest a big cup of coffee and some Google searches to have a look at what's out there. So the last resource I want to show you today are just some hot off the press things that we created for National Apprenticeship Week. And these are so simple and so straightforward, but we're really enjoying using them. They are aimed at the school market. They are specific to Hampshire at the moment because we've been sponsored to create them. But we have 13 different unusual types of apprenticeships listed. So here you'll see just one example of the surveyor apprentice, and it's so simple. It's just to begin a discussion. Either we can have it as a poster laminated that we can scribble all over, or as a PowerPoint, and we get groups to think about what a surveyor really does, the skills, the sorts of salary and so forth. And of course we provide the answers. You'll notice that we change the gender and we mix up the images a little bit, but we have questions and answers for 13 different sectors. And we also have developed 3 of these around quite large businesses. So what sort of services happen in the local council and what apprenticeships might that lead to? We've done something similar for a hospital and something similar for a sort of classic office come factory type environment. So what we're trying to do is just try and take people with us on a journey, showing just how diverse apprenticeships really are now, how all age encompassing they are, and start conversations around apprenticeships in general. So what I hope we've achieved today is to give you a little bit of a snapshot to bring you up to date with where we're at with apprenticeships, and certainly some of the resources and support and some of the projects that are out there that are behind apprenticeships, because actually we are really in an amazing time for interest in apprenticeships, and we know you as advisors will be having lots and lots of questions asked, so we hope that we can be helpful for you to make it easier to provide the advice and guidance that we know that you're interested to provide. So on that note, I am going to sign off, go back to Nadia, who will manage the questions, and I'll come back in if there are any that I can answer, or perhaps Jodie. But thank you so much for your time and for taking the time out today, and I hope that has been useful.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison, for sharing that with us. That was really, really fascinating. We have had one question through so far, and I would say in the meantime, if anybody, now is kind of the time for questions. So if anybody does have any questions that have occurred to them while Alison was presenting or since, please do just in the next couple of moments, do just type them into the questions box. But we can address one of the questions that's come up, which is, can the Sun resources, and I think this is in reference to what you were sharing towards the end of the webinar, Alison, can the Sun resources be shared with other NCOP partnership areas? From my side, so from the Sun perspective, that's something that I would certainly need to check, perhaps with the wider team, about exactly what could be shared. Alison, I don't know if you might have any thoughts on that in terms of the resources that you've created.
Certainly the ones that we created for Sun last year, the team that I worked with there with the Sun were really happy just to have the resources used. They were delighted if people wanted to use them. So I think the answer that you'll get from the team is absolutely share away.
Wonderful, thank you. And I know I do want to check with you, of course, Alison, with that, because they were resources that I believe you led on the creation of. But yeah, that's fantastic. And I do think in terms of NCOP sharing, we do obviously try to share resources and put stuff up on the website as much as possible as well. So it's always worth having a look on the website as well for kind of a range of our different resources. Okay, we've had a couple of thank yous and things come through, which is really great, and I'd absolutely reiterate that to Alison. I think that was really, really fascinating and covering such a wide range of material in a short time. If there are any other questions, of course, do type them in. But if we just turn to the evaluation very, very briefly, it will take just a couple of moments now, and then we can, of course, return to questions if need be. I'm just going to put up on the screen 3 evaluation questions, which are multiple choice, one after the other. If you're able to just answer as honestly as you can, that would be really helpful for us in terms of knowing what you thought of the webinar and what you might want a bit more or a bit less of next time. Okay, so the first question should be coming up on your screen now. There we go. Okay, I'll leave that open just a moment longer. Okay, thank you very much to everyone who's responded to that one. The second one should be coming up on your screen in just a moment. Okay, again, thank you very much. I will just close that one now, and the final question will be up on your screen in just a moment. Okay, thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts there. That's really helpful and can be really useful in informing the future webinars as well. Brilliant. I've just checked the questions and there's a couple more that have come through. So Alison, I'm just going to share some of these with you. We've got a question from Deborah, who's asked, can you just clarify the difference between higher and degree apprenticeships? So if the higher also includes levels 4 to 7 and degree only equivalent to levels 6 to 7. Is that something that you'd be able to address, Alison?
Hi, yeah, it's a bit confusing. I always find it confusing. From 4 to 7 is labelled as higher in degree, but of course the actual degree are 6 and 7. So it's a labelling. I think it's the way the apprenticeship sort of evolved towards the higher ends. They started out as higher, and then there is that sort of foundation degree that happens sort of around level 5 and so forth. So yeah, higher and degree are 4 to 7, but actual degrees you're looking at 6 and 7.
Okay, thanks for that, Alison. And again, thank you very much for the questions as well. Again, another question. So how do we find out the equivalent of ALPHI and the Solent apprenticeship? The question's just, the rest of it's just come through. So how do we find out the equivalent of ALPHI and the Solent apprenticeship hub in our areas?
So when it comes to the ALPHI network, we basically are all very independent organisations, but my best suggestion would be to Google your county and local training provider network, and I'm sure it will come up. There is one for every county. If you can't find it really easy by Google, please feel free to take my email address and ask me, and I'll be able to tell you who they are. When it comes to the various, whether or not you have a hub, it's slightly patchier picture. Not everyone does have one, but everyone does have a LEP that covers them. So go to your local LEP and just ask the question, what apprenticeship support do you offer? And they should come straight back to you.
Okay, again, thank you very much, Alison, for addressing the questions. And again, thank you to you all as well for asking those questions. It's really great to see that it's started some conversation and got people thinking. Okay, so in terms of any resources that people are interested in, particularly with the question earlier about the Sun resources, you are very, very welcome to get in contact with the Sun. So using the email address that you would have got the link for this webinar, so you'd have got the link from the Sun email address. You're welcome to get in contact there and ask for any resources you're interested in. Best to make reference to this webinar to just provide a little bit of context. But thank you very, very much for your participation in the webinar. And of course, again, thank you very much to Alison for providing so much information and so much insight on such a fascinating topic. We will hang around for another couple of moments. So if anybody wants to kind of type anything into the comments box, you are welcome to. But equally, we finished just ahead of time, which is great. So if anybody would like to now start to close down the browser window, you're also very welcome to. So thanks very much again for taking part, and we hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Nadia?